The following podcast is being brought to you by the Defy Life Podcast Network.
Welcome to Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network. Aftergate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alumni of color in their professional endeavors aftergate. Aftergate is hosted by Alvin Glimpf, aka Al, and Herman Dubois, aka Jerry. We are doing Aftergate because Colgate University has produced innovators who have changed the world every day, yet many alumni of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
Welcome to another episode of Aftergate. Aftergate, of course, is the podcast where we are chilling, having amazing conversations with alumni of color who finished Colgate, talking about what their life was like on campus, also getting a sense of who they have become, how Colgate might have impacted that, and just hearing that journey. It's been amazing conversation so far. Ladies and gentlemen, trust and believe on my word, we have a great conversation in store tonight with someone we both have fond, honorable memories of. So we are looking forward to these conversations, and I always try to kick it off. These conversations are great for us personally because in many instances, this is our first instance of catching up with this person. And in this case, this is that instance. So y'all are going to hear us reminisce, catch up, buckle up, sit down, get some coffee, some ginger tea, whatever you need to enjoy this conversation.
Okay.
But first, let me introduce my co-host, Ride or Die, 30 years deep, Mr. Jerry Dubois. How you doing, sir?
What's up, my brother? Happy Friday to you. Hope all is well with the fam and all.
Man, all is good here. It's Friday. Thank you for acknowledging that because, for those of us who work, Friday is a nice way to restore, relax, release. I just had a conversation with a dear cousin who's retired, and I tell him all his days are Saturdays. He don't know what day of the week it is when I call him because he's always chilling on his way to get on a boat somewhere. So, I take stock of that one day might be my life, but in the spirit of counting our blessings, I appreciate being able to work and have a Friday because there are some folk who don't have that opportunity to earn. So I respect that as well. So, but yeah, all is good, brother. All is good.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. And it goes without saying, I am super excited to get into this next discussion because she holds a fond place in my heart. Was very in sort of inspirational, but I don't think she even knows how symbolic she was, along with some of the other sisters from her class, in my unofficial freshman orientation about what was expected of me as a man of color. And I'm like, whoa, hey, that wasn't in none of the literature that I got, but I am forever indebted because she was a big part of the wake up.
One of the things I appreciate about this Colgate alumni color experience is that oftentimes there are people who have an impact on your life and they graduate and they don't know the impact they had on your life. And we've had that experience as we've mentored first year students that when we seen them after we graduated, they'd be like, yo, Jerry, man, you don't understand how much and you're like, dude, I was only there for a year, but still you played a role in their life. And I agree. Carla was someone who, as a senior, had an impact on our life. So without further ado, let me introduce class of 1988's own Miss Carla Beckford. What up, Carla?
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, I have to say, it is interesting and a bit surprising to hear you both say that I had made any sort of memorable impact. It really is good to hear. Surprising, and I remember getting a text from Jamal Young, who informed me that you guys mentioned something, and I was like, what, huh? You know, about some conversations that I might have had that might have stayed with you. So I appreciate that.
I usually started off by
Okay.
giving a memory, but
Okay.
I'm a let Jerry, if he's so willing, to share the story that I think Jamal is referencing.
So freshman year,
Oh
I'm
God.
assigned to HRC, and in the basement. And interestingly, I'm in a double with other four freshmen, right? I shared a double with a freshman, and there was two other freshmen in the other suite, and then David Crittenden was the upperclassman in the single in our suite that we shared the restroom.
Right.
And I'm first year, I'm fresh out the Bronx, no filter, and just like, let's get this college experience started. And I remember, and there are many instances, but in this in particular, I decided to use the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition pages
Yes.
to adorn my door to the suite. And that didn't last too long. I got a pleasant knock at the door.
Oh no.
Holly was my RA, and she said, we got to talk. And came upstairs and to her RA suite, and lo and behold was Ms. Beckford and Holly, and what's the sister's name? Donna.
Donna. Yeah,
Donna.
Donna.
Yes, Donna.
Donna
Donna.
Lawson.
Yes.
Caribbean
Yes,
sister, right?
Donna. Yes.
Yep.
And I'm like, yo, what is about to pop off here? And they, in a very eloquent but maternal, like, we ain't gonna have this up in HRC, and went on to educate me as to all the reasons why I was about to take all that down.
Oh no.
And what's crazy is that I obliged and did it like I will never violate as such again.
Wow.
But in reality, the beautiful part, and now in hindsight, because I didn't even know at that time, and honestly, I was like, wow, I did not intend to offend anyone or insult anyone, but clearly they demonstrated and articulated and educated me on how disrespectful it was to women, the objectification of what that represented, how disrespectful it was to women of color in particular, our forefathers and foremothers, our ancestors, and all the brothers that were either hung or lynched or killed for even just looking in the direction of a white woman. And here I am with all this plastered on my door, objectifying. And at that point, I was like, forgive me, I'm sorry. And that was it. And I had the utmost of respect of how they handled it and how they approached it. And I became, a follower from that point on. And it wasn't that they had to be in a leadership role of a title of an organization. It was about how they established an expectation and level of respect for all of us to be brothers and sisters. And I thought that was so dope.
Well, that is the story that Jamal did reference.
Oh, wow.
I did not recall it.
Look at that.
I am really glad to kind of hear it. Wow. And I'm glad you received it the way, it was intended. Part of what you bring back in terms of a memory is HRC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my experience at Colgate would not have been what it was without HRC. And what we tried to create at that time was a sense of family, and in any family, there are expectations. And the older, members of the family try to kind of guide the younger members of the family.
Amen.
I have to say, in 2021, I don't feel that it's as easy. And I have always, since Colgate, worked with young people. And so the fact that you kind of listened, you took in what we had to say, and you actually followed through, is something that I cherish because it's not as easy these days to have young people, listen. It takes longer, it takes a little bit more, but I certainly appreciate that. And you definitely brought back a lot of memories, a lot of love for HRC. So thank you so very much for that.
And I think a lot of that difference of then and now has to come to our rearing. And I think for those of us who were raised then, there was a expectation of your elders to correct you. And by elders, it doesn't mean of another generation elders. My brother, 5 years older than me, 6 years older than me, his expectation from my parents were if you see Alvin out there doing something incorrect, your job is to correct.
Yes.
Alvin, your job is to listen. And if I hear either one of y'all not doing your jobs, we got a problem with me.
Yes, yes.
And so I think to both of y'all, I think what that really represents was what was going on from the communities we came from. That it wasn't this thing where when we heard you, Holly, Jamal, any of those elders say, hey, this is how we get down here. Here's the culture. Here's the expectations. And then when we were out of bounds, we said, okay, or there were consequences, but at least it wasn't received from a, who you think you are coming to me telling me you ain't but 3 years older than me.
Exactly.
And I think that memory that Jerry shared, which is I knew what the memory was. I wanted him to share it because I think it does represent why you are held in such a fond, honorable, respectful Holly / sister, give her her name, sister, the Jamal, the Darians, those who were said, we're going to take what people gave us, pass it on to those who are coming behind us. And the only thing we really ask is that you pass it on to those come behind you. That's it.
Exactly.
That's it.
I remember going to David Crittenden, who was, again, my suite mate. We would often encounter each other in the shower stall or in the restroom or in the sink area. And I was like, bro, why didn't you give me a heads up? He's like, what happened? And I told him, and he said, oh, yeah. He was like, you took it down, right? I was like,
okay.
You know this?
I was like, yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
So,
but and shortly after connecting with David, then I became close friends with Ruth Chepe.
Yeah.
And she immediately became my big sister. Immediately, they were dating, so it was like
Ruth.
I got a 2-for-1. She was from the Bronx, Puerto Rican, and I was like, finally somebody who understands me. And she was like, I heard about the Sports Illustrated. I was like, damn.
Hey, it's a small campus. Word gets around fast. But really, shout out to all of you upperclassmen, those who graduated before us, the Daves, the Roofs, the Alvin Greens, the Carlas, the Winsoms, the Donnas. Who was the brother that was the artist? What was that brother's name?
He was on HRT.
Who, Mike?
No, he had murals all up.
Yes, his senior year, he did a bunch of art pieces.
Norm. I think his name was Norm.
Okay.
Norm. Casey Bells of the world, right?
Casey.
All of those good people. So, but all right. So let's start. Let's take it back. We done reminisce a little bit. We done, did some ice breaking. Let's take it back.
Okay.
Carla, class of 88. You start class of 84.
Yep.
You graduate from what high school? Where'd you graduate?
Hempstead High School.
Hempstead
High School.
Okay. So,
Island.
yes, I'm from Rosedale, so very familiar with Hempstead. Very familiar with Hempstead. So, give us a sense of what life was like in Hempstead. What's going on in the world back in the mid to early 80s? What kind of even attracted you to Colgate? Give us a sense of what the pre-Colgate world was for you locally, but even if you want to take it back to what's going on in the world, set that stage for us.
Okay. All right. So came to campus, Colgate's campus, 1984. So prior to that, I'm at Hempstead High School, and Hempstead High School is, a typical, what people would describe as urban high school. Vast majority of the students are Black and Latinx and Latino at the time, now Latinx. And, Hempstead High School was not one of those high schools at the top of the chart at all, by any means. In fact, maybe a couple of years after, it was taken over by the state. So not many are graduating and going on to the Colgates of the world. So I got an opportunity to, come to Colgate on scholarship. Otherwise, it wasn't going to happen. And came to the campus that weekend. And it was a beautiful April weekend. And I think they did it very strategically. And I think it's good that they do it because it really kind of helped to seal the deal. Coming on campus, you see the rich, beautiful trees and the lawns and, the grass, and I just fell in love with the campus, the physical layout of the campus, to be honest with you. We ended up, there was a weekend, we had a weekend, and I actually roomed and got to know Donna Loffman. And we clicked it off, a number of us. And so we decided, I think we decided before leaving the campus that we were going to choose this as our number one. Okay. I'd gone to Hamilton, I visited St. Lawrence, so we decided Colgate, and we ended up coming back. And I ended up rooming for the summer program with Donna.
Wow.
Yeah. So, wonderful summer experience. Got to learn a lot of different things during the summer, and then came back and chose HRC, Harlem Renaissance Center. And just as you guys spoke about those of us who were ahead of you in terms of, years, we look to, the people who were there, who had really struggled to get something like an HRC on campus. That was very important, because coming from a world like Hempstead High School, where everyone mostly looked like us, and then to come to a Colgate was huge culture shock, right? So to have a bridge, if you will, as to live in HRC was very, very helpful. So we had the mini Romans, we had Rita, we had Kirk, and so these were people who really formed the basis and had a passion and heart for HRC. And we looked up to them, and they kind of passed the baton on to people like myself to help us to understand what campus was like before there was an HRC. And it was up to us to kind of protect that legacy. And so at some point, I did become the head RA of HRC and the other, complex there. So, yes. So at the time, in terms of what was going on during my 4 years, what really comes to mind was really what was going on in South Africa with Nelson Mandela, apartheid. So that really sparked a lot of events on campus. To me, it really struck me. I have to admit, I didn't know much about that before I got to campus. And so there was a lot. I would say that I entered Colgate, with some inkling and of idea, in terms of how an individual becomes situated in the larger complex of the world, the larger ecological niche, if you will, of the world. And left Colgate was a much more complex and realistic idea as to how the forces can come together to impact the lives of one individual. And so I became very passionate about what was happening in South Africa and, saw it as an extension of so many things that were happening in the world. I remember going down the hill after taking Dr. Manning Marable's class, and he was talking about what was happening in Grenada with Maurice Bishop. And another thing, as somebody coming from Jamaica, from the Caribbean, born there, and came here at 10 years old, what happened, and putting the Caribbean in the context of Africa and the diaspora was very important to me. And understanding Jamaica's and the Grenadas of the world and Haiti's and their geopolitical place in the world was very important. And so all of that, came together to kind of shape me. But I was always interested in the individual and human development. So my major was in psychology.
Okay.
And so one of the few Black students in the department at the time, Darian, if I believe, was the only one of us.
Wow.
There were two of us, and we kind of, held on to each other to kind of get through that. But long story short, what was happening in South Africa was, very important at the time. And I think in many ways, all of the other things that were influencing, the world, for me at least, epitomized what was most important.
So I just think that's fascinating. And I think it speaks a lot to who we meet then as we come in as a freshman, because he lived in HRC. I actually lived in KED, but spent all of my waking time in HRC. And as you talked about family, so that's how I got to know you and Holly's, and because it was this guy lives in another dorm, but apparently he knows everybody in here and now welcomed me like it's all good. But in part of that, you as in the upperclassmen, really set the stage for us to understand that. But for me, I was not aware of anything political or anything outside of really a mayoral race. Like that was really my understanding of politics. Didn't even give a damn about the presidential or anything happening international. Grew up in New York City, had a lot of friends from the Caribbean, but didn't really care about what life might have been like outside of really United States. To really give myself more credit than that. To hear the passion and the connectedness of what y'all were really modeling of how do you represent on campus, but then even getting us to think outside of it's bigger than that and helping us see that as well, I think helped us as we started matriculating the sophomore, juniors, become a lot more open to a lot of those issues and a willingness to be more than just someone passively watching things go by, but become more engaged and an advocate and a leader on campus to kind of follow in y'all's footsteps, take the baton that y'all passed.
But it was part of that exposure, particularly with what was happening with Nelson Mandela, that I remember the buzz and the sort of the engagement on campus among students of color. And that was, for me, what opened, it was the first time I had even been sort of thought beyond the Bronx and was made to actually feel that it was important to know what was happening in other parts of the world. And it was important to think of what role I could play on my side of the world that was aligned with what was happening in other parts of the world. And then it just took off from there, because then shortly after, Dr. Eleni Tedlis yoked me up and became part of the Sankofa Way. And it just all sort of organically morphed into this experience that I truly believe was the difference in the rest of my life that would not have happened had I not been at Colgate. And yet all of this was not anything, it was not part of my, genetic Western civilization requirements. This was not a major. It was all the education that occurred as a result of being at Colgate around the people like the Carlas, like the Dr. Eleni Tedlas, like the Banner Haleys, and it just is what's made it all worth it.
No, as you were speaking about, not necessarily differentiating, but I would say as an adjunctive to our education, what the events were that we got together, various members of the community coming out of HRC and not. Because one of the things that Alvin reminded me is that there were quite a few people who did not live physically in HRC, but sometimes we didn't really know that. So HRC became a kind of hub, and it's kind of provided the energy and the inspiration to encourage us to find the time outside of our classes to plan and to enrich our learning by bringing people to campus like Dr. John Henry Clark.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Dr. Ben Yusuf Yakinen.
Yes.
Dr. Adelaide Sanford.
Yes.
Prime Minister,
wow. Yes.
Prime Minister Michael Manley.
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Betty Shabazz.
Maya Angelou.
Kwame Ture, Maya Angelou.
Yes.
Jimmy Cliff, right?
Angela Davis.
Yes, Angela Davis. So, we brought a lot of powerhouses to the campus that really helped to broaden our horizon. And they had a passion that they left on the campus when they came to campus. And that really helped to deepen our knowledge and our understanding of who we were in the world at that time, going and able to connect the past to the present, allowing us to kind of forge out an idea for what our future could be like.
But it wasn't going to happen unless you got involved.
Yes,
and decided
absolutely.
to be present. You had to be present. You didn't have the luxury of being on the sidelines.
No. And sometimes people would call you out.
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
That's part of it.
But it was,
call people out because you were in the heart of it. Both of you, you still are. But what I'm saying is part of the energy is that if one were kind of on the sidelines, somewhere, somehow, somebody would kind of get a message to you,
No.
You kind of step up a bit.
Because it was serious. Because we believed, we believed that what we were going through on campus was extremely important. And then what's going on outside of this campus is extremely important. So you don't have the luxury of just standing on the sidelines because your contribution could make a difference. And I think that's what I learned as a freshman, like, nah, dude, it ain't just about coming in here, getting your degree, having a good time, partying, dating all of these young ladies. I know that's what you thought when you came up here, because I'm like you, when you talked about that weekend in April, I can remember my subfrosh weekend. I can remember coming up on the bus. I can remember meeting people, some females that I'm like, oh yeah, she gonna be here freshman year? I'm coming. Oh, sophomore? Oh man, I'm coming. But then you get up here and you're like, oh, damn, this could be a much deeper, richer experience. And to what has happened is we did make an impact. We do have a legacy in terms of what our experience was really. Anything else that you can think of in terms of maybe your classroom experience that you want to talk about, or just anything else you want to share about those 4 years while you were there?
As you were speaking, I think part of what I'm aware of as someone who focuses on children and adolescent development, I think part of that passion that we were able to kind of bring together came about because we were in that stage of adolescence. And I'll talk about that later, but the passion, the spirit, the energy, the energy to party all night, stay up and do all-nighters for a paper, came about because of adolescence. And if you think about the people who are making the change, whether locally, nationally, or internationally, a lot of it happens during that period of youth, right? And I'm using that term just to kind of, I guess, as an intro to maybe something I'll mention later, that youth development from 18, we're hitting campus, that goes on, through, and it could extend further, but psychologically through age 25 or so, but we're leaving campus at 21 and we are still fired up and we're still passionate and we're still, involved in whatever it is we choose to do.
What do you look back as accomplishments when you think of those years?
Accomplishments. Well, I think one of the things that I tried to do, and I still do, in fact, and this is part of what I bring to the table coming from Jamaica, even though most of my life I've been raised here. The formative years that I had in Jamaica, you know, it brings me back to that conversation we were having about family and the place in the family in terms of the relationship between elders and youngsters, right? So I take that on no matter where I go, wherein I believe, you know, it's my responsibility to kind of pass on information to young people. So I'm hoping that in some respect I did that. But physically, one of the things that I did do while I was on campus is I was very involved in planning things, very involved in, you know, trying to get things started, very involved in the organizations, BSN, you know, WISA, BSN, Black Student Union, BSU. BSN is Teachers College. And the West Indian Students Association. I also, at one point, I was also dancing with Holly, but then I kind of felt that I needed to kind of dig down into psychology, which was not particularly easy at the time. So so I also was I was actually Jamal's RA.
Wow.
I was Jamal's RA, and then I became head RA. So the activities that I did outside of the classroom, you know, was also something I do remember once, and you know, we can talk about this later in terms of some of the things that I focus on in terms of adolescence. I remember once there was something that happened on campus. I think it might have been something where some student, and it had to have been a student of color, and I think at the time it might have been a Black male student, was accosted or something having to do with blackface, something like that. And there was a lot of, you know, uproar on the campus because of it. And when I went to class, my psychology classes, I didn't hear anything about it, you know? And so the faculty were having a meeting, and I walked into the meeting. And I asked them, there was some flyer or something going around. And I asked them, what are your thoughts about this? And it seems that it's being ignored in our classes. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Well, I didn't win any prizes for that, but those were the kinds of things.
Accomplishment. Let me put this on your radar in case you don't know about this.
That I did, you know, and at some point, they didn't like the fact that I disrupted their meeting, but it did get on the agenda, and they started to kind of talk about it in the classes. I honestly experienced Colgate in many respects as alienating at the time. I am very glad to see that where Colgate is now in terms of all of the activities it's doing to kind of bring it into the 21st century, you know, looking at issues and really doing something serious about issues of diversity and inclusion. So I'm very happy about that. And I kind of feel like just thinking about, I mean, I'll never forget being on right outside my door as an RA and having a fellow student kind of touch my skin to kind of figure out what that was about. And so I kind of feel like the Colgate then and the Colgate now are years apart, you know, which is good, you know, because it's important that those years where young people are developing and thinking about their ideas and getting shaped and before they go out into the world, it's really very important that they understand that they are part of a world community.
In hindsight of those reflections and even just throughout the time you've been away from campus, is there anything that comes to mind about what you might miss, or, you know, times where you feel a bit nostalgic about, wow, you know, life was great then?
You know, the one and important thing that comes to mind, you know, first of all, I'll lead up to what I consider to be most important, but there are other things, you know, being able to, you know, have camaraderie with a group of talented and intelligent young people who are passionate about things, being able to, you know, have a buddy to stay up with to do a paper, feeling uncomfortable in a class, but having Darian right there as the only other psychology major to kind of, help. So the friendships, definitely, something that we can take for granted, but those were important. The number one thing that I think about that and I've spoken with other Colgate alums, and they kind of agree that perhaps, we might have taken for granted what was created by an HRC, as an example, and all of the activities that we had access to. And I can say that since leaving Colgate, it's something that we have to create. Something that I have had to create since leaving Colgate. Whereas while I was at Colgate, it was there for me to enter or for me to do with it what I wanted to. And I'm really glad that I was definitely, in the mix, involved while I was there, and I was able to enjoy that, because it's not every place where you go, whether it's your workplace or graduate school, where you're even going to have the time to sit around and discuss these issues, as we did when we were at Colgate.
It is. Facts. So we're going to take a quick pause and allow time for our sponsor to get some shine. And then we'll come back and wrap up this conversation with Carla B in the building. So this episode is sponsored by Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do. Welcome back. As always, we want to thank our sponsor for Hope Murals. We definitely appreciate all that you do with our adolescent youth, making sure that they are familiar with the urban arts and helping stimulate their mental and physical development. Also want to shout out our network, Defy Life, where you can find this and other dope podcasts at the Defy Life Podcast Hub, which is www.defylifepods.com. You can also go to godefylife.com to get written content and check out their branded apparel at defylifegear.com. And just remember, if you're not defying life, what is your life about?
Ooh, okay.
Hello.
Yes.
So we are back to wrap up this conversation with dear Carla. And I'm going to pass it to Jerry. Would you like to lead us with our next question with our guest?
Sure. I can't even set this up by referencing if you live under a rock. Unless you live under a rock, you wouldn't know, because this is everywhere in the world. I don't think there's anywhere where it's not impacted by our unfortunate, tragic status of healthcare across the world. And as we battle and continue to battle COVID-19 through yet another year, we're really very interested in knowing sort of what's your thoughts on, everything that's happening across our country, particularly around mandates for vaccines, mandates for mask wearing, sort of what are our political responsibilities, what are our personal and community responsibilities, and as an educator, what's your take on how that impacts our young people and their learning and so forth?
Okay. So with regard to, COVID-19, let's go back to, if we can remember when we were issued, at least I'm going to talk about New York State, and other states followed in suit, or some didn't follow actually, in terms of social distancing rules and masking and all of that. But I remember getting the notice I believe it was March 19th. We left I left the office. We were supposed and we still haven't returned fully. I work in New York courts. I do forensic assessments there. And so it hit us at that time. One of the things that kind of, threw me into a frenzy beyond that was having a friend of mine who was also in mental health call me on a Saturday morning. I think it was the 20th actually. And she said to me that one of her young people who she works with, and this is a high schooler, got shot. Mm. Now, he's supposed to be at home. He's supposed to be hunkered down at home because there's been a mandate issued by the governor to stay home. However, I knew even before I got the call from her that a significant percentage of our young people are not going to be able to follow this mandate. Part of that has to do with normal adolescence, where they need to be out and about. They need to be exploring the world. They need to congregate with their friends because that's what adolescents do. And, you know, during adolescence, there's also this initiative to kind of break rules. So I knew that that was going to happen. So one of the things, so I had been thinking about, you know, I had been trying to connect with other, you know, providers. Okay, where do I volunteer? Where do I do this? And then it dawned on me at the time that there will be no place for, you know, clinicians of color and other frontline professionals to, you know, really have a place to manage this pandemic. I also knew instantly that not only did we have a physical health crisis, we had a mental health crisis, okay? And we wouldn't see that until later, but we're still living with it now. And so my concern right now at the time, so I brought together a group of professionals. There were psychiatrists, one was a lawyer at the time, it was Winsome actually. And there were 7 of us, and we got together to put together a call to action that we developed, and we issued it to the governor, and we were able to get it to the governor, and we outlined, you know, a 10-point plan as to how to respond to the needs of communities, underserved communities of color, whether they were going to be in line to get testing, if they lived in NYCHA housing, whether they were going to get testing, whether they were going to get anything. This is very early on. But at the core of it, what we were concerned about was that we had communities who were struggling with health disparities on almost every level. And now comes a pandemic that was already being reported as wiping us out disproportionately. And we wanted to know, were the resources going to be distributed according to need? Now we are at a place where, you know, people are being required to be vaccinated. And we still have issues with regard to significant health disparities. And I don't believe that nationally or even at the state level, we have addressed that problem in terms of health disparities, whether it's health disparities having to do with heart disease, lung cancer, whatever physical, maladies that we come down with, diabetes. Now we have a mental health crisis on top of it. What, you know, you said, you know, if we're not defying, what are we doing? We have to take control of our own health, because without our health, we have nothing. We cannot do anything. So one of the things that we had talked about in the group, and the group is still ongoing, by the way, one of the things that we had talked about was the importance of each individual valuing their health to such degree that they get to know what their underlying health conditions are, including mental health conditions, and then they address it. I've spent time with friends on the phone who are still reluctant to get the vaccine at this late date. So we are struggling with a number of things. And now we're seeing where people might lose their jobs if they don't get vaccinated. And while we don't have the numbers, because they're not collecting those numbers in terms of the percentage in our communities that aren't getting vaccinated, the ones who are at risk of losing benefits, losing their jobs are, you know, comes from our communities. So I'm hoping that from this pandemic, and Then the mental health crisis was it was one unparalleled experience we had was what happened with around everything having to do with George Floyd. And so what we witnessed, something that was so unprecedented, particularly during our lifetime, where you have a pandemic and then you have all of what was taking place with George Floyd. And it almost sent us into an existential crisis. And so I think we still are at a point where we're not really asking the question as to how do we meet the moment in terms of all of these multiple, in health we call them syndemics, where so many crises come together to overwhelm resources. But what I get concerned about as a psychologist is how do we protect ourselves from being overwhelmed individually and internally. So I'm hoping that one of the things that we take away from this period from 2020, because we're still, dealing with it, is that we come to appreciate and value and take our responsibilities on for protecting our health, our physical health, our mental health, our economic health, our spiritual health, our intellectual health. I really believe that there is a message behind this period, and I'm hoping it is that we begin to value every single day the life that we have on this planet, and we just do whatever we can to make sure we're going to the doctor, we're getting access to healthcare, and we're using those benefits by going to all of the specialists that we need to, including mental health.
So I just had a flashback on the moment I thought that really birthed this podcast, Aftergate. And it was about a year ago. You and Darian are doing a Zoom call talking about the after effects, COVID, what we need to do, how to take stock, how to take ownership. And I'm just blown away, so impressed, like, how come I don't know what these people do for a living?
Okay.
I don't know how did she get to be this just magnificent, brilliant. So that's what I would like for you to share.
Sure.
Help us understand your journey after Colgate. Walk us through that, and then let us know who you are now and what do you do.
Okay. All right. So at Colgate, for some reason, actually, while I was at Colgate, if I was in BSU or I was in WISA, I was somewhere on, the office that had to do with education for some reason. And it's because I'm actually passionate about education. So after Colgate, I became a teacher, got my master's degree in elementary education at Teachers College, Columbia University. And, but I still to this day, and I don't choose, I seem to must have, one foot in education and the other in mental health. And so after, doing the, going along and becoming, practiced as an educator, I still focusing on children and families. I became a psychologist and graduated with a Ph.D. in clinical psychology from Columbia. Did post-doctoral work in assessments, because I figured that part of having good treatment is you have to understand the problem. And one of the things that I experienced while working in Harlem was that our young people, our children and our teenagers are living in unprecedented complexity. And what I was seeing in mental health is that a lot of the clinicians couldn't really wrap their heads around the level of complexity, the level of clinical complexity. So I decided to focus on, diagnosing, an assessment. So educational assessments, psychological assessments, neuropsychological assessments, and bringing you up to the current, I do forensic assessments in New York courts. And so on a daily basis, I'm dealing with children and teenagers. I am very concerned about the school to prison pipeline. I focus a lot on trauma. And within the midst of our trauma, there's always been resilience. So those are the kind of, clinical topics that I deal with. So on a daily basis, I'm in court doing assessments with children, sometimes unfortunately as young as 12, 13. And I'm also doing assessments on mothers and fathers and adults coming in for a host of different reasons. And I also teach at Teachers College in the Health and Behavior Studies department because I also focus on health disparities.
Well, off camera, we need to talk because we are in some parallel industries.
Okay,
Dope,
wonderful.
dope,
Yes,
dope.
that's what it's all about. Absolutely.
That's exactly what this is all about. Go.
So with all of that, and where have you now, and where have you been, and that journey is awesome. I just want to like play it back and listen to it again, because as you were talking, I was like, okay, I want to ask about this, I want to ask about that, but we're gonna say that. If you look back to who Carla was at 18 going into Colgate, right? And with the Carla you are now, what might be the advice, the words of wisdom you would give to yourself back then, and then tweak that to now you've gone through 4 years of Colgate and you're entering the world, and what might be some of that same advice you would give now post Colgate experience, but you're still now figuring out what's next for you, as the seasoned vet you are. What would that sound like?
Yeah, I think, looking back at my younger self, I think what I would do is to say to value relationships, right? And all relationships, family, friends, and hold on to them, because I think at the end of the day, that's why we are here. I would also say to prepare with the best, to gather whatever my passion was. And at the time, my passion was both education and psychology, to really get to know the top 10 best scholars in whatever my chosen fields are, and to know them well, and just to continue to prepare. With regard to managing, I think one of the things that I had difficulty with while I was at Colgate was managing things, because I tended to take on stuff. Now, would I want to limit taking on some of that stuff? I can't say that I would say to limit it. Maybe prioritize better, so prioritize better. I had a lot of great experiences meeting people on campus, meeting different students, talking to different people, listening to their ideas, and also working with others to bring people to the campus. And that demanded a lot of my time, a lot of my energy, but knowing how to balance and prioritize is probably something that I would have advised my 21-year-old self to do better.
Fantastic.
And something you said that I made me think about how, I never thought about the idea of taking certain things that we had for granted, right? And I think about how something like an HRC was so a matter of fact for us when we were there. And there's an entire gap with students of color now not understanding the relevance of HRC because of the way in which it was either presented or not even an option for them. And I find it very interesting because you think about how, at least for me, I know Alvin didn't live there, but he spent enough time there to know that it was the safe haven, and how important it was to have a safe haven for folks who did not even know what the rest of their life would be like. But in the presence of what they were going through, that was a place where I remember every time I walked into HRC, just being able to be like,
yes,
I don't have to be on my guard anymore. I can just chill, and that was something we took for granted.
Yeah. It's funny you said that, because before you breathe that sigh of relief, that is what came to my head. I was, I can remember, if you remember, there was one door where you came down from where the classes were, and it's a hill and you're going down. And I remember opening that door and was like, you
I'm
know,
home. I'm
just
home.
kind of breathed.
Yes.
And you know, I guess I always wanted to, but I was too busy at the time to kind of get involved to challenge what was happening with HRC. But I was really feeling very hurt by that, to be
Oh
honest
yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
You know, we could get into a conversation about that because I do think that question, I remember standing right outside my door as an HR and people beginning. I remember someone coming to talk to me about this issue that was being raised when I was there about whether HRC is still necessary. And I said, look, we are not even going to allow that question. Okay.
Yes.
It is not, it's just not a question that is going to, we don't allow people to question our existence.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're not going to, it's not going to be answered.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Well, it's
so,
not too late to, you mentioned like when you heard about the challenges with HRC that, you were maybe a little reserved about getting involved. As far as I'm concerned, it's still not too late because it's still an issue.
yes.
And I think that there's, some sense of a reawakening, but I think what this offers us is an opportunity to come back with a 2.0 HRC, because we know that HRC was just basically, they took an extension of Bryan Complex and said, we're going to call it HRC. But imagine the opportunity with the new development on campus to actually build an HRC in the mindset of what we would want. And so imagine the cultural center ground level being the entrance to a dorm, 5 floors, that it becomes HRC, where you have the opportunity to have all of what we know the culture center offers, but then above it, behind it, as an extension of it, have a residential. So then that just, but my vision, but yeah, I still see the reincarnation of an HRC in a different format, the reincarnation of La Casa Pan Latina, which I've been talking to Lasso folks, and they moved them off campus to a house that's falling apart. Yeah. So same argument that I think it does take the alum to be able to come back and say, no. This was a pillar that was necessary then, necessary now, and will be and should be a staple of what makes Colgate for all students, but in particularly for the experience of students of color. So
that's it. We always ask a Colgate question that you had no idea which was coming. Okay. Who was your favorite person that we brought up on campus, and why? Who stands out?
Okay. All right. So one of the persons that I still to this day, hold in terms of my top 10 people that we should know about and understand actually is Dr. John Henrik Clarke. It's hard to choose because I went through a number of names, but if I had to choose, I would say, Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Having spent a lot of my time in Harlem, I got to attend things that he, where he was, what he tried to do, but definitely what the legacy that he left, we still have access to, in terms of his writings, in terms of all of the things that he has done. And one of the things that I really liked about him, I was just speaking about him in my last meeting with my mental health colleagues. He really had such a broad and deep understanding as to the experience of Africans, no matter where they were, whether they were on the continent, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, and in North America as well. So deep respect for him, and I still have much more to learn from him.
Amen.
It is.
Is there anything that you would like to share, promote? We love to use this as a platform for alumni of color to not just learn about our guests, but also support, engage with them as well. So if there's any initiative, any website, any social media, anything you'd like to plug, any point of view, we've had people use this time to say, here's something you didn't ask me about, but I'm gonna tell you this.
Right.
Here's your moment.
Well, I don't have anything specific at the moment. There are things that are in progress.
Okay.
So if I could, when they do come to fruition, if I can holler back and say, hey, this is now in completed form, that would be a good thing. So the things that I'm working on right now, one of the things that I've always been passionate about is that a lot of our young people don't have access to good assessments.
Mhm.
And so that's something that I'm working on, and I'm developing a research proposal that I'm going to be submitting to Columbia's IRB, where I can go into Harlem and provide assessments that are too pricey, for families to get, because in order for our young people to get the services and the treatments that they need good assessments. And so that's one of the things that I'm working on. One of the things that I'm also, and I have a date for it, October 24th, I can, send you more information about it. My colleagues and I in mental health, we do a community healing. The next one we're going to do is on October 24th. Sunday, October 24th. And we're still in COVID, so we're doing it on Zoom. And we basically, just kind of have us, it was a call that Dr. Maya Angelou put out. And so different mental health clinicians across the country take this time to kind of engage community, to do a community healing. And so the next one we're doing is Sunday, October 24th at 2:30 on Zoom. And I can hit you back with the link.
Please. We will promote it on here, and we will also post it and just, get the word out. And then anything else at any time that you want to plug, promote while we are doing it, count on it as a done deal.
Okay.
All right.
Are you available for private diagnostic sessions? So if a family was interested in your services, is that something you do independently, or is there a lane for that, or that's not in your world?
It's something that I'm in the process of setting up. One of the things that I'm trying to do is to kind of do things in a sort of timely manner. So heading towards where I would do consulting work with primarily children, teens, and families in the context of family. So that's where I'm heading. And so the project that I talked about with regard to assessment is headed in that direction.
On that note, we are going to wrap this episode up. So with the greatest level of sincere thank you, we just want to let you know how grateful we are to have heard your story, and just appreciate you coming through.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited that we're doing this. So impressed. Very much thankful that you're doing this. I didn't know about this until Jamal sent me a text. And I think this is a wonderful platform that you guys have created. And thank you so much for inviting me.
So we appreciate all the support. This has been another episode of Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network. Make sure you check us out all of your favorite platforms. So check us out on Spreaker, Spotify, Our Heart. Check us out. Thanks to our interns, Izzy, Kathy, Sophia. Much love. And just make sure you check out more episodes, more dope conversations to follow. Peace, family.
Shh. You hear that? Listen closer. That, my friend, is the deafening sound of focus. It drowns out all the useless noise that can clutter the moment. Naysayers don't exist. Haters? Smaters? The peanut gallery? Who's that? When you in your zone, all that noise and all that buzz is just elevator music. So, enjoy your journey, focus on your goal, and bask in the quiet roar that is progress. Because when it's your time to shoot that shot, spit that verse, or close that deal, the only voice that matters is yours. Defy Life.